It's 6 p.m. here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. I'm Daniel Che for Arirang News. Former Keangnam Enterprises CEO Woan-jong wrote up a list of political bigwigs who he was giving bribes to before he took his own life last week. A full-scale investigation into the allegations is ongoing, as it is set to be the main topic at a special National Assembly session this week. A group of doctors in Japan has mounted an exhibition highlighting the inhumane acts committed by Japan's notorious Unit 731 in an effort to set history straight. Despite the sluggish economy, the number of jobs in Korea's manufacturing sector is on an upswing, reaching a 17-year high thanks to steady job creation efforts. Let's start with the repercussions of the Woan-jong list. A brewing corruption scandal surrounding several heavyweight politicians dominated an interpellation session at the National Assembly that kicked off today. Our Park Ji-won starts us off.
The first day of the Parliament's four-day interpellation session centered around a high-profile scandal that started with a note written by former Keangnam Enterprises CEO Woan-jong, who committed suicide last week. The note contains the names of heavyweight politicians, including Prime Minister Lee Wan-koo, former and current key aides to President Park Geun-hye, and 4 other ruling Saenuri Party lawmakers who allegedly took bribes from Song. While the prosecution launched a full-scale investigation into the allegations on Monday, the main opposition party has vowed to use the interpellation session to probe deeper into the scandal. During Monday's parliamentary session, Chung Chang-nae, a 2-term opposition party lawmaker, called for the resignations of 2 people on the list.
President's Chief of Staff Lee Byung-hee and Prime Minister Lee Wan-koo should step down and be investigated.
The Prime Minister cannot influence the prosecution's investigation.
Meanwhile, the ruling Saenuri Party stressed that the Keangnam CEO's network stretched beyond the ruling party to include people from the opposition camps. One ruling party lawmaker, Kim Sang-tae, also called on the prosecution to widen its net and include more people in the opposition camp in its investigation, arguing that the late businessman was given 2 presidential pardons by the late President Roh Moo-hyun.
Isn't it rare for a person who was convicted of a crime to be pardoned twice?
It is pretty rare.
On Sunday, President Park Geun-hye called on the prosecution to be thorough in its investigation. Politicians whose names are on the list, including the president's 2 key former aides and Busan's current mayor, have vowed to fully cooperate with prosecutors. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The South Korean government has denounced Sunday's armed attack on its embassy in Tripoli, in which 2 Libyan police officers were killed. In an interagency meeting on Monday, Korean officials focused on assessing the situation and discussing ways to protect its citizens in Libya and other parts of Africa and the Middle East. As a tentative step, the 2 Korean diplomats and 1 embassy staffer in Tripoli may be moved to Tunisia, where a temporary office has been set up. The South Korean ministry also offered its condolences to the victims' families. Although a local source told Korea's Yonhap news agency that the attack was most likely aimed at killing the embassy guards, officials in Seoul are trying to determine whether the gunmen were targeting the Korean embassy. A group that says it's the Tripoli branch of the Islamic State militant group has claimed responsibility for that attack. A group of doctors in Japan have taken action to criticize their government for its attempts to hide and distort history. They are urging the Shinzo Abe administration to set up the record straight on Japan's notorious Unit 731 that committed some unspeakable atrocities before and during World War II. Our Soon-jung-in reports.
A group of Japanese doctors held a special exhibition in Kyoto over the weekend to demand the truth behind the atrocities committed by Unit 731, the Japanese Army's biological warfare division during World War II. The exhibition gave detailed explanations of the brutal experiments the unit performed on around 10,000 civilians and prisoners of war from Korea, China, and Mongolia from 1935 to 1945. Despite the barbarous experiments, including freezing or skinning people alive, the members involved in the unit were not convicted for their war crimes. The United States secretly granted them immunity from prosecution in return for the data they got from the vivisections. Officials of the unit also received doctorates and went on to become renowned scientists. 70 years after the war, some doctors in Japan are taking action to try and set history straight.
Why did this happen? What exactly happened? We need to first answer these questions correctly.
However, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe still refuses to publicly release the related data. This is in marked contrast to Germany, which convicted 23 medical doctors for their crimes in 1946. 손정인, Arirang News.
April 15th marks the birthday of late North Korea founder Kim Il-sung. The regime usually uses this occasion to showcase its military prowess, but experts say that's not likely to be the case this year. Our Hwang Sung-hee explains.
3 years ago, fresh into power, young North Korean leader Kim Jong-un launched the Una-3 space rocket. The defiant attempt was a failure, but it was followed by the regime's largest military parade ever, showcasing nearly 1,000 weapons. The events had been organized to mark the Day of the Sun, the April 15th birthday of the young leader's late grandfather and North Korea founder Kim Il-sung. This year, with the date fast approaching, the regime remains relatively calm. North Korea's state-run media reported Monday that the military held a ceremony on Sunday to reaffirm its loyalty to Kim Jong-un ahead of the Day of the Sun. Experts don't expect any provocations from Pyongyang in the next couple of days.
So I think there's a strong need for the regime, as well as for Kim Jong-un, to establish strong reputation as a strong leader who doesn't really care. I think Kim Jong-un has consolidated his power, so he has less of the need to show to the rest of the world who the leader is.
Some say the next North Korean provocation will come just before the young leader's first overseas trip. That could be next month, when Kim is widely expected to travel to Moscow to attend the Victory Day ceremony, marking the 70th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany. But not everyone thinks so.
It will be against his own interest to launch another provocation that actually might make Putin look bad to the international community. So I think Kim Jong-un will try to behave in the best manners this time.
Even if North Korea does test fire a missile, experts doubt that the regime will launch a long-range rocket. That would violate a handful of UN Security Council resolutions and further isolate Pyongyang from the international community. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Staying on to North Korea, the reclusive regime says South Korea's deployment of new weaponry, including the U.S.-led missile defense system known as THAAD, or Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, will launch a new Cold War era in Northeast Asia. The North's Rodong Sinmun reportedly cited Russia's opposition to the system, which Moscow has said would threaten its national security because the radar system can cover Russia. Pyongyang also slammed Seoul's recent request to buy hundreds of Hellfire and PAC-3 missiles and related equipment from the U.S. The U.S. State Department has reportedly already approved the possible sale. President Park Geun-hye hosted the president of Turkmenistan, who is on a state visit to Korea this week. In their second meeting since President Park's trip to the Central Asian country last year, the two leaders focused on expanding cooperation in Turkmen infrastructure and plant construction projects. Our Choi Yu-sun reports.
Turkmenistan holds the world's fourth largest natural gas reserves, and there appears to be great potential for Korean firms to win infrastructure projects in the Central Asian country. There are three main deals in the pipeline. Following up on agreements from a leaders' summit last June, a Korean consortium and the Turkmen government have agreed to a $1 billion project to build a facility to eliminate sulfur from petroleum products made at a Turkmen oil refinery. The same consortium and Turkmenistan signed a tentative agreement to consider Korean firms for a $4 billion order to build a plant to turn gas into gasoline or diesel fuel. A third deal was secured to construct a steel production plant. Korean export credit agencies will also lend their financial support to efforts to bring about more Korean participation in regional infrastructure projects. At their second meeting in less than a year, President Park said she anticipates the growing bilateral cooperation between the two countries will lead them to joint efforts to address global issues, including those concerning the environment and terrorism. Her Turkmen counterpart, in response, said Seoul and Ashgabat also share views on maintaining security and peace in the Asia-Pacific region and around the world. President Park's spokesperson said Monday's summit is expected to help bolster Korea's Eurasia initiative, which seeks to link energy and logistics infrastructure projects from the Far East to Europe, lay the groundwork for regional peace, and impact the global economy. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Let's talk jobs now. Korea's manufacturing sector, which has been the heartbeat of the nation's economy for many decades, has been having a torrid time over the past couple of years. But while annual production growth has recently stumbled along in the 0% range, the number of people employed in the industry is at its highest point since the late 1990s. Our Kim Min-ji has the numbers.
The number of jobs in Korea's manufacturing industry has been on an upward trend for 32 straight months, hitting a 17-year high in February. That's what Statistics Korea data shows despite the sluggish economy weighing industrial output down. Over 4.4 million people had jobs in the sector, up 3.7% from a year ago. The industry has regularly added new jobs since the mid-1970s, before job growth slowed in the wake of the Asian financial crisis, and then again during the 2008 global financial crisis. Job expansion picked up in 2010 on the back of economic recovery and has since been on the rise.
Before 2008, structural reforms in manufacturing limited the number of jobs, even though the industry was expanding. But after the financial crisis, the better the industry did, the more jobs were created, especially in key sectors such as automobiles and machinery.
What's notable now is that industrial output has slowed sharply. Production rose just 1.4% in 2012 and since has only recorded annual growth in the 0% range. This has raised concerns that the phenomenon could lead to employment without growth.
The number of jobs has increased at a fast pace, and one factor behind this is the rise in the number of people working shorter hours. The pace of industrial output hasn't been able to meet job expansion because it doesn't necessarily mean more labor input.
Experts say that with more people actively looking for work, especially those in the baby boomer generation who have to prepare for retirement, employment figures will likely continue to rise for some time. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, the World Bank has warned that the number of working Koreans could fall at the fastest pace in the Asia-Pacific region. According to a report by the Global Institution on Sunday, the number of Koreans in the economically active group, those ages 15 to 64, is expected to drop by more than 15% from 2010 to 2040. Korea and Hong Kong were the only two countries in the region to exceed the 15% mark. The World Bank report also said that Korea has the second fastest aging population in the world after Vietnam. This follows the IMF's warning last week about Korea's low birth rate, which could also decrease Korea's workforce in the future. Outside of Korea, Hillary Clinton has officially announced her second run for the White House, and this time around, her campaign has made some drastic changes to try and win over voters. Clinton, who lost her last bid for the Democratic ticket to President Barack Obama, is presenting herself as a more approachable candidate who understands the needs of the average American. Our Kim Yeon-bin tells us more.
It's official. Hillary Clinton is taking another run at the presidency. And this time she's casting herself as a champion for the average American, with a vow to create a level playing field for those who are struggling from tough economic times.
Everyday Americans need a champion, and I want to be that champion. And I hope you'll join me on this journey.
Clinton is currently the leading Democratic candidate in the 2016 race and has few expected rivals. According to a recent Reuters Ipsos poll, she's backed by more than 60% of Democrats. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, who says she's not running, came in a distant second with 18%. Former Virginia Senator Jim Webb and former Maryland Governor Marion O'Malley are possible Democratic candidates, but polling for both was in the single digits. Still, Clinton will have to overcome the lingering criticism from her last campaign that she is out of touch with the average citizen. After all, she has been one of the most famous figures in the U.S. for the past decade, as a former Secretary of State and the wife of former President Bill Clinton. To overcome her pedigree and broaden her appeal with voters, she has shifted her launch message to something warmer and more empathetic.
2007, when she announced her campaign in her rally in Iowa, the first rally that she appeared at, she said, "I'm in it and I'm in it to win it." This time, she's making it all about the voters.
Clinton also lost ground the last time around to her main rival for the Democratic nomination, President Barack Obama, whose use of technology and social media gave him an edge in getting his message out. Clinton kicked off her 2016 campaign with a flurry of video, email, and social media announcements, including one email saying she's going to work her heart out to earn every single vote. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Scores of distinguished journalists from around the world have gathered in Seoul this week for the World Journalists Conference. This year's declaration takes the peaceful unification of Korea as its theme, as 2015 marks the 70th anniversary of the independence and division of the two Koreas. Around 100 journalists from 60 countries will discuss ways to guard freedom of speech, especially as the threat of terrorism against media outlets and journalists has intensified in recent years. The week-long conference hosted by the Journalists Association of Korea also offers various programs to help foreign reporters better understand Korea. And we've come to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with more at 10 p.m. Korea time.